After the emergence of the Barbarian kingdom in Italy, the only acting emperor remained Zeno of Constantinople, so the capital of the empire moved away from the western borders of more than 1,000 kilometers. Germanic kingdoms of Gaul, Spain, and Africa before that already decades enjoyed de facto independence, could breathe even freer. With all desire, Emperor Zeno could not have a significant impact on them. The first decade of Zeno's reign is a continuous rebellion of pretenders, in which the emperor several times sat in a siege and was saved solely thanks to the transition to his side of the influential Isaurian general Illa. Despite the invaluable help in holding the throne, the relationship between the emperor and his savior were very strained. Zeno sought to distance himself from Illa. It even came to attempts to poison. But every time there was a new rebellion, he had to resort to the services of a difficult ally. This continued until finally Ill himself rebelled. The rebellion of Illus, who proclaimed the patrician Leontius emperor, lasted until 488. Thus, Western Europe could not fear attempts to restore imperial law and order, and the barbarian kingdoms faced the questions of improvement, consolidation of power, and succession to the throne. The common feature of the states of the Vandals, Visigoths, Burgundians, Franks, and Odoacer's assemblage was the Germanic military aristocracy, which embraced Arianism and ruled over large masses of the local Latinized population who professed the Nicene Creed. Arianism was an extremely convenient moral and political choice, firstly not so conscientious to rob and commit atrocities against foreigners. Secondly, Arian priests did not depend on the Roman bishop, who managed in a constant struggle and vigil to keep a centralized management of their clergy. Although Rome and neighboring Ravenna ceased to be a haven of political power, the connection of the Nicene Christians with the former center of the empire embarrassed the Germanic kings, and they instinctively felt threatened by this organization. The Vandal king Huneric, in his 50s, who received the crown after the death of Haiseric, at first tried to make friends with Constantinople. He even thought to convert to Catholicism, hoping to change the order of succession. Haiseric bequeathed the crown to the eldest of his descendants, and although Huneric's older brother managed to die, his children were older than the king's son, little Hilderic. In order for the crown to still reach the native son through his nephews, it was necessary to either change the rules or remove the pretenders. Huneric allowed the priests of Nicaea to gather their synod and finally elect for the first time a Bishop Eugene, but soon felt that flirting with the Catholics was too dangerous. The population was dissatisfied with the disenfranchisement and plunder. Eugene was stubborn and uncontrollable. The bishop's connection with Rome and Constantinople threatened to create a fifth column inside the country in case of an external invasion. Huneric went to Plan B and engaged in methodical murder of relatives. As for the Nicene Christians, persecution against them increased manifold. When I say persecution intensified, I don't mean plagues or bonfires. Catholics had their limbs chopped off and their faces mutilated. Catholics were simply killed in gruesome and brutal ways, terrifying the survivors. The Edict of Huneric demanded the conversion of all Christians to Arianism, whereupon they began to be tortured, tormented, and executed throughout the country. Weakened by internal intrigues of the nobility, religious persecutions, wars with their African neighbors who began to attack, the Vandals completely stopped their raids. After the defeat that Odoacer caused them in Sicily, Hunanrich again, and this time forever, ceded the island to Italy, leaving only the port of Lilybæ, as it was the first stopping point for ships sailing from Carthage. Together with Huneric, King Eiric of the Visigoths also began his persecution of Catholics. By several successful campaigns, he expanded his kingdom to the Rhone and Loire in Gaul, fought long and fiercely for the Mediterranean coast of Gaul, until, finally, Odoacer made peace with the Goths, giving them all the territory beyond the Alps, including Arles. This ended the expansion of the Visigoths. Eiric got the largest piece of the former empire with a population, according to some estimates, more than 3 million people. The remaining years Eiric devoted to the colonization of Spain. The Goths, originally settled in Gaul, almost did not settle in the Spanish provinces, so the power of Eiric was often there nominal. One of the first barbarian kings, Eirik put his laws down in writing, before that simply known to the Germans orally. The Code of Eirik is known to us from a few passages, and it is the first of the many later so-called barbarian laws that young states would later issue to streamline their judicial system. Everywhere, according to these laws, in barbarian states the population was divided into three categories of people. The most privileged were, of course, the Germans. They had the maximum set of rights, and it was their lives that were valued above all else. The rest of the population was regarded as full-fledged second-class citizens, and often continued to live under their old Roman laws, the fulfillment of which was now monitored by kings. The third large group of the population, the slaves, colons, servi, whatever they were called, continued to be the same slaves as they had been 1,000 years before. Eirik feared the large non-Aryan population. The Goths were forbidden to convert to Catholicism, probably so that professional warriors would not lead the rebellious people. He did not allow Rome to reappoint bishops to replace the dead, seeking autonomous election of priests, trying to split the church institutionally. Soon, after the fall of Soissons in the north, it was conquered by the Franks, and the annexation of Dalmatia by Odoacer, there was no place left in the former Western Roman Empire where Catholic rulers ruled. One of the most critical moments in the history of the Western Church happened in 483. First, Rome courageously rebelled against the Enoticon adopted in the East. Emperor Zeno, seeing as Monophysites in Egypt and Syria win back the cathedrals and push supporters of the Council of Chalcedon, decided to reconcile the warring parties and to issue a conciliatory document canceling the decisions of the Council of Chalcedon and the Second Council of Ephesus. Patriarch Acacius of Constantinople began to force priests in the empire to sign the Enoticon, and when Patriarch John I of Alexandria refused to sign the letter, he was deposed and replaced by the Monophysite Peter Mung. The enraged John appealed to Rome for help, and Simplicius supported his fellow believer, starting the schism known as the Acacian Schism. Not only that, in the midst of these events, Simplicius died, and the Church, already seemingly deprived of all allies, was dealt another insidious blow. Odoacer announced that dying, the Pope begged Odoacer to participate in the election of a new pope and prohibit the appointment of a new bishop without the approval of the king. As a result, a representative of the Arian Odoacer arrived at the meeting in Rome and presented a decree which the deceased Simplicius had recognized, and according to which from now on the election of the Pope should be held under the supervision of royal ambassadors. Nothing remained but to comply. So, nowhere else in the west of the empire, except perhaps Ireland, were Catholics ruling, and even the election of a pope was controlled by the Arian Odoacer. The population of the empire waited with horror for the complete triumph of the wild and greedy Arian, who with impunity appropriated the wealth of the Latins, waiting in vain for help from the distant eastern Constantinople. How the new Pope Felix III will cope with the gravest crisis and why he will excommunicate the Patriarch of Constantinople, we will learn in the following videos.